Hello, you lovely lot, and welcome back to Who Knew, a Doctor Who podcast. I am your host, as always, Josh Carr. Normal service is very much resumed in terms of me bringing absolutely banging guests to come and chat to me about Doctor Who, and this week is no different. I have got what can only be described as Doctor Who directing royalty, someone who's directed 8 episodes of Doctor Who across the Chris Chibnall era, and something that I discovered, only Euros Lynn and Graham Harper have directed more episodes of the revival than Jamie Magnus Stone, who is my wonderful guest today. Hello, Jamie. How are you?
Hello, Josh. I'm good, thank you. Thank you very much for that very sweet intro and for inviting me on.
Yes, well, it's an absolute pleasure to have you. Thank you for coming on, because, you know, we've got a lot to talk about, because as I said, you know, you've directed many an episode of Doctor Who, so I'm sure there's some fantastic stories in there. But what I want to do is start where I always start, which is at the very start. Doctor Who, many people come into it at different points of their life as fans or working on the show. I'm intrigued as to what your earliest memories of Doctor Who are. Were you a fan growing up?
It's a funny one. I think I was sort of born just at the wrong time. I suppose the kind of perfect age to be sort of to first meet Doctor Who in the 90s. I suppose in that gap where it was off air. I feel if I was 10 years younger, I would be sold hook, line and sinker, would be a total fan, and have grown up with the revival. And if I was 10 years older, I would have adored the tail end of the classics.
Yeah, that's the unfortunate thing for 90s babies, isn't it? It's you're in that sweet spot where it's off the air, and sadly, you know, there's not much Doctor Who to go around unless you're delving into books and all sorts of audio dramas and things like that.
Yeah, so I just kind of missed it. There was a few, I was aware of it, and I remember watching the TV movie of it back in the 90s with my dad. He sort of he was not a huge fan of it necessarily, but he sort of, you know, gave me a sense of its sort of cultural significance. So we watched that together. I had a really quite early memory of watching Genesis of the Daleks on TV. It took me a few years after to actually learn what it was that I'd seen, but it really left an impression on me. I hadn't seen anything like it at the time. And then later on, kind of in adulthood, once I started making films and you know, graduated from film school, my first proper gig as a director was doing mini episodes of Doctor Who way back in 2013. So I did a little tiny episode called Clara and the TARDIS, and a little bit of second unit directing on Nightmare in Silver. Around that, to sort of prep for my, you know, it was my first time I was ever paid as a director for 2 days work or something like that.
Wow.
So I watched all of the 11th Doctor stories that were out up until that point, and dipped into some David Tennant stuff as well. So I kind of became a fan, you know, and I adored it. I sort of hoovered it all up. So I sort of became a fan by getting that little gig at first and going, oh, I should watch all this, and then I got hooked.
It always gets its teeth in. Does Doctor Who? Obviously, you touched on it there. Obviously, one of the reasons you're here is you're a director. I know, obviously, you're from a family that has sort of been in the industry. Your parents, and I know your grandfather was in the industry. Is that where your desire to become a director came from, or was there some external influence in that?
No, it that was definitely a big part of it. Was kind of growing up with, you know, family members that were working in, I mean, different pockets in broadcasting, but I suppose it was a big kind of grow up and know that was a viable thing to do, and to have that kind of encouragement that you know, yes, you can, if you can do this for a living, which I know is a sort of very strange thing to do. I also, it almost had the opposite effect at first, because, you know, my dad's a director. He does documentaries and drama, but growing up, I kind of loved seeing him work, and how, you know, I loved the idea that he was always scheming with his mates, who were all the people he worked with were his best pals, and they would have these kind of big dreams, and occasionally we'd get a project off, and then but I'd also see through him how unstable it is as a job, and how, you know, there's sort of, you know, long periods often where you're out of work, and it's really, you know, difficult to kind of predict where you're going to be one month to the next. And so that there was, you know, I also got kind of an unvarnished view of the, you know, instability and the uncertainty of the job as well, which did put me off it for a while initially, and thought I'd maybe pursue illustration or something like that. That was always what I most enjoyed at school. And then while I was studying fine art, I tried my hand making some short films, and found it just the most rewarding, creatively fulfilling thing I'd ever done, and then so I ended up kind of veering away from fine art and into film and animation.
So exciting, and like I said, I mean, it's great to see that obviously you're very much, in terms of Doctor Who, you've started a very good time, because you you came into the show, as you mentioned before, with those sort of minisodes. You had Clara and the TARDIS, and I know you worked on The Last Day as well. It was a minisode that you worked on, which, but all in the build up to the 50th anniversary. How did that come about? You, in terms of maybe getting approached to come on to Doctor Who, or was it you maybe knocking on the door to try and get in? How did the opportunity to work on those minisodes come about?
I'm not entirely sure, funnily enough. I had just been signed by an agent, which I didn't really know what that was at the time, but I sort of said yes, and an agent had seen some of my short films, and it was one of the first meetings that was set up through my agency. I think that Marcus Wilson, who was producing at the time, had seen some of my shorts, and the shorts I used to make were quite sort of, I suppose they're quite a good fit for Doctor Who in some ways. I tended to make sort of heightened family films that were set in either post-apocalyptic or in space, or so I suppose it was quite kind of compatible with Doctor Who. But I met with Marcus Wilson and read for Nightmare in Silver, and had a meeting potentially about directing that, and got on very well with Marcus. Didn't get the job, and I don't blame him at all. I think I was about 25 at the time. I was nowhere near ready.
Yeah.
But it was amazing to have the meeting, and it was amazingly to feel like I was being taken seriously as a director for the first time. And then a few weeks later, I sort of got a message saying, would you like to come in and do these? I think it was Clara and the TARDIS was the first one, and it was very it was an amazing opportunity to kind of cut my teeth, I suppose, working in TV in a very limited capacity, where it was sort of not even a full day's shoot. We'd kind of jump between doing bits of Clara and the TARDIS, and then jump out and we're on call to do bits of second unit for the larger episode that was filming, but having to work within a strict kind of TV schedule and fit within that kind of, that sort of larger machine. That when I was doing shorts, it was just kind of working with friends. So it had a different flavor that was a really good experience. So it was an amazing opportunity, but I'm not entirely sure how it came about. I suspect that maybe Marcus sort of didn't give me the job, but wanted to give me something. So
yeah.
Up with it.
Yeah, no, that's lovely. It's great to see you given that opportunity at such a young age. And then in terms of your, for want of a better word, love affair with Doctor Who, it has a little break for a while until you come back sort of 5 or 6 years later. And obviously I assume in that time, you're going away, you're working on various different TV projects and other films and things like that. So did you ever expect to end back up on Doctor Who at some point? Was that, once you got a taste of it, was it a goal to go, I'd love to direct an episode of Doctor Who now that it's hooked you in, and it got you as a fan as well?
I mean, it wasn't something that I expected, but it was something that I'd hoped. And I'd gone off and had a lovely time working in different genres and starting to work on larger TV projects of my own, which is great fun to do. But having had that tiny little taste of working on Doctor Who, with those mini episodes, and the kind of the fun and the sort of controlled chaos of it, and the playfulness of jumping around time periods and different sets. And while I was there just doing shooting in the TARDIS for that one day, I could see all these other amazing costumes and sets in the surrounding studios, and it always just looked like the most fun thing to do ever. So I'd always sort of kind of hoped, and occasionally would ask my agent to check in and see if there was anything going. But as a freelancer, you don't really have that much control over what comes your way. The timing has to, you have to be available and free at the same time as a job is looking for a director. And so there's a lot of serendipity involved, but I was very happy and grateful to be kind of given the knock to do the 13th Doctor's second series.
So coming on to that, as I mentioned before, it's 8 episodes you've directed of Doctor Who in a surprisingly short span of time as well, that's the thing. Like, obviously I mentioned other names like Euros Lynn and Graham Harper. They're over many years, and sort of within 2 to 3 years you did, I mean, let's list them, because let's list the fantastic episodes that you've directed: Spyfall Part 1, Praxius, Ascension of the Cybermen, The Timeless Children, The Halloween Apocalypse, War of the Sontarans, Village of the Angels, and of course the Centenary Special, The Power of the Doctor. I mean, a big list of big stories there. There's some very important stories within that era as well. When the call did come, was it Chris Chibnall reaching again? Was it just a knock from the agent saying that there's an opportunity to come on Doctor Who? And were you aware at that point that it may be sort of ongoing? Was it or was it just the one episode to start with and then more came along?
At the start, it was the first block of season 12, so it was going to be 3 episodes. I didn't know what they were yet. Was it 3 episodes or 2? No, sorry, 2 episodes. And I met initially with Matt Strevens and Nikki Wilson. I didn't meet Chris, I think, until I'd actually got the job, but I know that he had seen some of my shorts, I think, and some of my TV work. So I'm sure he was across it. I met Matt and Nikki in a very dark grading suite. I think that they were in the middle of grading season 11, because I can remember it was so dark. I found it quite hard to see their faces. It was quite hard to read how it was going. But I was very, very happy that they gave me the job. And yeah, and I Jamie Childs, who started off season 11, was a friend of mine, and I know that he'd had a great time on it, and so I was able to kind of say, how's this to work on? He said, it's it's amazing, the best job in the world. So I was even more excited to kind of go for it then. And then they kept on asking me to do more, and I was loving it. So of course I would.
Fantastic. I mean, like I said, in terms of someone who's a fan of the era, only a few episodes back, in terms of the interviews, we had Chris Chibnall himself on talking about the process of making Doctor Who in this time. And I mean, I think what you were able to do with those stories, especially when we're talking about Flux, in terms of the limitations that have been placed on you as a production team, is absolutely phenomenal. When you're going into direct an episode of Doctor Who, what are the first things that you're thinking about? I mean, what are the first things that you're seeing? Is it a script? Is it just rough storylines at that point, or are you getting things that are more fully fleshed out? And what's your approach to turning that into what we see on screen?
I mean, it varies, I suppose. Often on Doctor Who, the first thing I would get would be more along the lines of rough storylines, or I might have one script of the block. Usually TV's filmed in blocks of 2 or 3 in time. So sometimes I might have one script, and then the other ones would come a little bit later, and on those ones I'd have more sort of storylines, and they would still be forming. And in a way that can be quite interesting or fun, because as I'm scouting locations for one story, I might find something really interesting that has nothing to do with that story. But Chris was so kind of collaborative and sort of open to input that sometimes, he'd go, "Oh, what's that photo of what have you found there?" And then work it into the more embryonic, so that was still forming. And I suppose early on, sort of what I'm looking for and trying to get a sense of is genre. I mean, more than almost any show that's ever existed, Doctor Who is able to play with genre, and each episode you're doing feels like a little mini movie. I mean, often the TARDIS is kind of the only standing set that sort of is consistent through the series, and each of these little movies has their own cast, their own microtone, their own genre. So I'm sort of looking for kind of what that is, and trying to sort of think of what what motifs there might be, what I can do that will give that episode its own identity. And I can start doing that from an outline, even before the script is ready.
It's fascinating, because as well, what you're given in those stories. I mean, one thing that stands out to me, and I actually said this to Chris Chibnall in terms of his pre-showrunner stories, was that he was very much entrusted with big moments in, I'm hesitant to use the word, filler episodes. I use that in a term of endearment, because I love those in between standalone episodes of Doctor Who, but moments that stand out in sort of the lore that are slotted into those. What stood out to me is looking at your episodes that you've directed as a list is, again, big moments. You've got Spyfall Part 1, which is that massive master reveal. The Timeless Children, which is probably one of the biggest reveals Doctor Who has ever done. The Return of the Sontarans, and then what we'll get onto later is the 100th anniversary of the BBC, the special that was done for that. I mean, and a regeneration story to boot. How does it feel when you're shooting something? Because Doctor Who is something that's been there long before all of us, and it's going to be there long after all of us. And you're shooting moments that there's always an element of doubt, I imagine, when you're creating something as to, is this going to hit? Is this going to stick? But you know that some of these moments are going to be remembered for years to come. Does that come with its own element of pressure? Does it come with an element of excitement of, well, if this is going to be shown over and over and over and over again for the rest of time, let's make it the best it can be?
Yeah. I mean, I felt that pressure, whether it was a big consequential, for lack of a better word, I felt very lucky and fortunate and very trusted to be given the chance to do some of these big episodes where there was, hugely affected the lore of the show. But I felt that pressure anyway, even on the episodes that weren't that overtly big as well, just by dint of the show having this kind of amazing history to it. So that was something that I was always aware of. Something that Chris was always very good at doing to me as well was giving me the kind of classic Who context of what he was doing, and even sometimes before getting the script, I'd know kind of what the lineage or continuity was in his head. He would say, before I got the script for essentially the Cyberman, he would say, could you go and rewatch Caves of Androzani and a few other. Here's some viewing material for you, just to sort of load all this into your head to kind of make sure that continuity was there, and there's always myriad small ways that you can tie things into that continuity. So I always really appreciated that. I felt personally that weight of expectation on the quote unquote sort of smaller episodes as well as the bigger ones. And with those bigger ones, it becomes an exercise in trust and for me to trust the writing, I suppose, and the overall plan of the series. And I felt very very fortunate to get to play a part in some of these bigger reveals.
They were directed wonderfully, I must say. And you're also working with some of the best acting talent that the UK has to offer. That's sort of always a guarantee when you're working on Doctor Who, is that you're going to be getting the cream of the crop. And obviously the area that you're working in is sort of the closest thing to an ensemble that we've really had since Classic Who, because you've obviously got the amazing Jodie Whittaker there. You've got Bradley Walsh, Tosin Cole, Mando Gill. You've got John Bishop. You've got Sacha Dhawan. You've got these amazing actors that you're working with. How did you find working with them on set? Was it? I've always heard stories about the Chumley era that even within the chaos of making Doctor Who, it's always going to be stressful. There's always going to be things to fix, but it's always so much fun. Did you find that on set, or were you having a great time on set, basically?
Absolutely. I mean, don't get me wrong, it's stressful. There's a lot of thinking on your feet and pivoting plans, and there's all the stress of any film shoot, often just dialed up because of the kind of material that you're doing with Doctor Who. But it's absolutely true what you've heard about it having this kind of very loving, fun family atmosphere. And obviously for me, coming in season 12, is it season or series? I always get that wrong. Anyway,
yeah, I don't think anyone knows anymore. Yeah,
but coming in and having Jodie and Tosin and Mandip and Brad already there, they were so tight, and already had a whole series to kind of forge a bond together. But they were so open and loving and welcoming, and just a really kind of generous bunch of actors as well, always kind of helping figure out problems to help us make our days, and to not be the stumbling block that's going to sort of trip us up. And Jodie in particular was just amazingly generous. She always had a lot of dialogue in every scene. She's always got the lion's share of the dialogue. It's really complicated, really verbose, and often she's had to learn it really quickly because of revisions. But she was often so generous with the guest cast of kind of saying, Jamie, it's all right if you can shoot their singles first and do me last, which often means that she'd be under more time pressure. But she was really good at kind of welcoming guest cast into it and making them feel welcome and important, even if they just had a couple of lines. And that really set a tone for myself and the whole crew as well. So yeah, it had a really tender vibe on set. It's
something that's come up a lot on the show, because I mean, in terms of Flux specifically, we've had a lot of Flux alumni on the show. We've had Pete Levy, who was the producer and the COVID manager as well, I believe, which I think I said this before, a hell of a job. Obviously yourself, Chris Chibnall, Dan Starkey, and everyone's been so passionate about talking about Jodie as an ambassador for the show, on set, off set, when when Doctor Who's not even shooting, she's always very conscious about carrying Doctor Who on her shoulders, and I think that always comes across in stories like this. No time is that more important than COVID, and naturally it's something that's always going to come up when talking about the production of Flux, because frankly, from everything we've heard, a bit of a miracle that it got made and it came out at all, never mind looking as incredible as it did. Was that a daunting challenge to go, right, let's try and make a series of Doctor Who while the world's ending? Was it a challenge that you relished?
I don't know about relished, but it was definitely that the whole crew and cast rose to, and Chris, but also writing to the strengths or the possibilities that we were able to kind of continue with in COVID. I mean, it's weird now being a few years out. I sort of feel like my memory of it has kind of erased all the stressful stuff, and I just remember about my memories of Flux are kind of almost exclusively positive now. But it was really tough at the time, and also we were just very lucky. I think that as a production and as a crew, because of the wacky nature of Doctor Who, we were quite adept at being agile and being flexible, and often just in any normal given day of Doctor Who, for some reason more than on other productions, you might have a location fall through or a last minute change in cast. Or it's I use the term chaos very affectionately, but it's quite a sort of a living, fast moving scenario and way of working on a normal day. And I think that as a sort of a production team, they became very good at pivoting at short notice and finding a new thing to shoot one day if something had gone wrong, and that kept us agile during COVID. So we were able to, if a member of cast tested positive or had an inconclusive test, and all of a sudden everything that we were supposed to shoot that day disappears, finding something else for us to shoot almost immediately. Or, okay, I know that this set is only half finished, but this part of it looks finished. We could maybe do some shots here, and then we can move to this studio and we could do this other thing. And there was kind of an agility that was a particular strength of that team that I think helped us navigate through COVID comparatively unscathed compared to other productions. I think we were one of the few productions in the country that didn't ever actually shut down. We had road bumps because of COVID, and I came down with it in the middle of shooting, and so did some of the other cast and crew. But we were able to kind of maneuver and ride it out and keep the show going and keep us moving. And sometimes it forced interesting other choices that we wouldn't have taken. I think that earlier on we were meant to do an away chunk of filming, a bit like we went to South Africa in the previous season to do locations there, and there was kind of a standard by that point of you do a chunk away filming because it opens up the amount of locations and landscapes that you have access to. But that disappeared, so it meant that we had to shoot all in Wales, which is in the winter or in the autumn, which isn't always ideal for weather. But then we ended up shooting War of Sontarans in this kind of miserly, rainy sort of, forget where it was, but it looked great, and it had a really sort of interesting look by us staying in rainy UK and trying to shoot through it, and it gave it its own flavor. So because my mind seems to have erased all the painful stuff, I had a good time.
Yeah, no, that's great. I mean, as a fan, I think this is very much the thought of so many other fans, that especially looking back on it now, we're just so grateful that yourself and the other creatives involved were able to keep the show alive. Because I think it's fairly clear now that there was, I mean, Chris Chibnall said it himself on the show, that there was essentially like a moment where Doctor Who was done for at least the time being, and then to manage to get 6 episodes out and then the 3 specials subsequently is absolutely phenomenal. And you touched on there, obviously, the limitations sort of inspiring creation and inspiring things that you maybe wouldn't have thought of. I think that is sort of constantly been the mission statement of Doctor Who, that the fact that it's small budget, even back in the classic era when it's made for 50p and a piece of string, and they're creating some of these gorgeous worlds and things that are purely just from the minds of these incredible people. I'm intrigued on both sides of the coin. Is there anything else, like you said about the setting of War of the Sontarans? Is there anything else that you think the limitation of Doctor Who has led me to this particular decision that has really benefited the story, and vice versa? Is there anything where you've gone, God, if only we'd have had a bit more time, a bit more money, a bit just something else, I could have got that? Is there a shot or anything that you look back on and think, God, I wish I'd done that differently?
These are tough questions. I might need to think about those. I mean, what you said is there a shot I wish I'd done differently? That I'm sure there's way more than this if I actually give it some thought. But for some reason, the thing that popped into my head was the power of the Doctor. I tried to do this oneer of a Shad storming through unit and smashing everything up, and it was, it was just scheduled as part of a normal, go as fast as you can kind of day, and we didn't quite manage to get it all together. There was always a bump or something wrong, so we had to splice two shots together that didn't quite match, and it always annoys me that I didn't quite get that as a true oneer, but it was great fun to do.
Yeah.
And I'm glad with what we got, but that's one I would have loved one more take. But I think we were literally out of the sort of the charges that make sparks blow. I think we actually used them all up in our first 3 takes, and then that was that. But but that's a really minor one. I'm sure there's lots more if I actually thought. And in terms of kind of limitations fostering creativity, I mean, that just happens. It happens every day on the show. There's myriad examples. I mean, the show has a nice kind of leaning often towards doing things practically, which I think I always enjoy doing anyway. But often that that comes from a restriction of time and money. But I think it's an aesthetic that when we get it right, really suits the show. My mind's gone blank. I can't think of any absolute specifics. I'll jump back to it when
Yeah. I'm sure we'll come back to things with the correspondence from listeners as well, because there's a lot of questions along similar lines. I'm intrigued to talk more about Power of the Doctor, because it's obviously a massive episode in the history of Doctor Who. I think also, I mean, I haven't double checked this, but I can't. As a fan, I can't think of any other examples. Surely puts you as the person who has directed the most Doctors. Surely. You must be up there. I mean, it's definitely in one episode, because that's the most Doctors we've ever seen on screen at once.
Yes.
So
I have to confess, I some of the Doctors were done just after the shooting wrapped, and
yes,
my partner and I had our first baby a few days after we wrapped on that show. In fact, we were doing the stuff in the volcano kind of near the end of the shoot, and I was like half a mile down this tunnel with no phone reception, and I was like, I wasn't sure if the baby was being born yet or not, so I was having to like run out. So like, check text, no, still no baby, and then run back down. And some of like Peter Davidson's stuff and Paul's stuff, there was a couple of Doctors that couldn't quite make it in on exactly the same day. So I shot the Edge with minus a couple of Doctors, and then Annetta Lofer, one of the other directors, very kindly filled in for me. So, but I was sort of at the hospital and wasn't able to come in, so she covered for me. So technically, I might be down a couple.
Well, I'm sure we can allow it. We can absolutely allow it. I mean, I'm also fascinated by it, because, I mean, watching it was just from a personal point of view. People who've listened to the show before will know this story already, but watching it was a very mad experience for me, because I had extra stakes in the matter, in that about 5 or 6 days after it aired, I was hosting a panel at Comic-Con with Peter Davison, Colin Baker and Paul McGann. So I will say thank you, because that threw a massive spanner in the works in my plans. I had to rewrite my entire list of questions. It was essentially now a Power of the Doctor panel, and I'm absolutely happy with that, because I think I was it was lovely to get in so soon after it aired. But I do remember speaking to them about filming it, and Peter was like, well, I filmed mine a little while ago, and Paul McGann was like, well, I filmed mine at a completely different time. They just shoved me in a room somewhere at a Comic-Con and put a costume on me. I was like, it's so beautifully Doctor Who that you can have one of these incredible moments, and like I said, behind the scenes, it's gloriously creative, but it all comes together on screen when these people are all in completely different rooms at completely different times.
And directors, I think there's a shot as well. Like I'd spoken to Annetta about it. And there's a shot that tracks behind Jodie's back, and it starts off as Colin Baker and then turns into Peter Davidson. It's before the old face morphing. And so I'd shot the first half of that shot, and then I needed Annetta to like match the lens and the distance and the speed.
Oh wow, that's
a single shot across months with different directors. But props to Robin Wenery, our wonderful DOP, who was, I think kept all that looking the same and able to cut in with itself.
Yeah, that's incredible, because it's absolutely seamless, and you wouldn't think about it in terms of Power of the Doctor. Not only is it a massive episode in the history of Doctor Who, it's a regeneration story. It's a massive celebration of this, the nearly 60 years that's gone before it. At that point, it's also a massive celebration of the BBC and the creativity of the BBC and the 100 years of the BBC up to that point. Was there extra pressure on that because of all of those added things than there was with the other episodes, or was it, let's try and approach this in the same way that we would any of these other stories?
I wouldn't use the word pressure, but there was an extra kind of excitement and sort of expectation, I suppose, about the whole thing. But it was a myriad of things. I mean, the BBC's 100th anniversary, it was amazing to get to be a part of that and to mark it out. But it was, I suppose, the bigger thing for me was that it was going to be Jodie's last episode. I knew, at least for a long time anyway, it was going to be my last episode, and the end of what become a big chunk of my life, and the end of that team, that version of Doctor Who. So it was the added pressure kind of really came from that, knowing that it was a big responsibility and a big privilege to get to kind of cap off an era of this historic show. So that I suppose added more pressure / excitement than the BBC's 100th anniversary, which was cool as well.
Yeah, like I said, it's put you. I meant what I said right at the start of the show in terms of Doctor Who directing royalty, because even some of the directors that are most synonymous with the show, in terms of your Doctor Who CV, you've really ticked off all of the essentials, because you've had, I mean, let's go through it. You've had Daleks, Cybermen, Master, Sontarans, Weeping Angels. You've had a regeneration in there as well. You've got such key cornerstones of Doctor Who, all encapsulated within your stories. Like I said before, a master reveal. That's just the most Doctor Who thing that's ever existed. It's really, really cool to see you bow out on a story like The Power of the Doctor, where it's really just, as well as being a fantastic story, it's a fantastic celebration of Doctor Who, past and present and future. I absolutely loved it. And shooting a regeneration, I think it's also very different in your point of view, because I think, again, we're aware that regeneration was shot open-ended. So it wasn't like a changeover on set. It wasn't that, David comes in, or whoever the next Doctor was going to be at that point comes in. Shooting a regeneration like that, I mean, it's also a very different regeneration to any that we've seen, especially in the revival. It's outside of the TARDIS. It's this massive swooping shot away, and it's a gorgeous shot, a gorgeous moment. What was it like shooting that, and where did the idea for the cliffside and that come about? Was that from Chris? Was that a combination of you and Chris?
No, the idea for the cliffs at Durdledore was Chris. So it said in the script, she steps out onto Durdledore, which I initially misread and thought it was actually on the beach. I didn't initially understand that he meant, like on top of the rocks.
On the rocks, yeah.
My first sort of plan for it was, I thought, we'll go down to Durdledore onto the shore, and I wanted to build a couple of walls of the TARDIS to have a real physical threshold out from the sets, and then be, and to do it physically and for real, and step out onto the sand, not realizing that it was actually meant to be up on that thing.
Yeah.
When I remember speaking to Jodie really early on about that, and saying, I think maybe, it'd be fun, maybe we could do this in location and take some of the set down. And she kind of looked a bit sad when I was saying this, and I was like, what's up? And she sort of said, we're going to shoot this last, right? But that was always going to be the plan, because it would just sort of feel right. And she sort of said that, like, the studio at Roth Lock felt so much like home, and if we were all a big family, which it felt like we were, then that's our sort of family home, and it would feel much more fitting to actually sort of finish it there in the in the studio, which where we'd shot so many so many other things. I'm so glad that she said that, because it ended up being absolutely the right thing to do, both kind of for the spirit of the day and spirit of the moment, as well as practically, because I'm sure I would have dragged us to some rainy seaside, and I'd misread it anyway, and we're supposed to be on top of the rock.
Mm-hmm.
So after having that chat with Jodie, we decided to do it in the studio, and that was great, because it just meant that, you know, so many people, everyone came down from the production office, and from, you know, Chris was there, and the editors who were working up, so the production staff, everybody found some excuse to come down, hanging around on set, and then which was shot later. So it was the best call all around. And then I went down to Dirtalour a couple of times with a drone unit. I wanted the light to be in a certain place, and it was I think the first day the weather wasn't really good. I went down a few months later and got the sun slightly more where we wanted it. I'm so pleased with how it came together. It's a beautiful shot, which is much to do with the with Ben, our VFX maestro, as well as it is to do with me. And Jodie really nailed that those last words. And yeah, I forget what the original question was, but I had a great time.
No, I mean, it's just fascinating hearing about it. It's absolutely fascinating, because, you know, there was obviously a moment there where, not necessarily, you know, locked in, this is going to be the last episode of Doctor Who ever, but an uncertainty of what's coming next, because obviously you're shooting it open-ended, and you sort of are you shooting it with the idea of this could be the last we see of Doctor Who for quite some time, or did that all come later? Were you aware of any plans for anything going forward, or?
I wasn't, no. I mean, I think all of that stuff was kind of going on maybe around me, but I wasn't aware of it. I mean, I think the script that I had sort of said, you know, it described the regeneration in the light, and said something like "until a new dawn" or something like that, and you know, it was kind of left in a poetic but optimistic but kind of open way. It definitely didn't say, and here, you know, and she turns into David Tennant, but I hadn't taken that as, oh well, the show might not continue necessarily. You know, I kind of knew it was going to be, obviously it was Jodie's last episode, and it was going to be the end of Chris's run. But I just assumed, they're still working on finding a new showrunner, and you know, we weren't sure who it was going to be, so I wasn't aware of there being a possibility of it not continuing. You know, I'd never read the script for a regeneration episode before. I wasn't sure if this was always the way it was done or not.
Yeah, of course, yeah.
I was really ignorant and just had my head down and was continuing to shoot the episode. Really,
you touched on there that the regeneration is obviously a beautiful shot. I'm interested. It's probably such a boring question to ask a director, but I'm going to ask it anyway. What, across your time on Doctor Who, are there any particular shots that stand out where you go, that's me working at my best with the production team? That is an absolute banging shot.
Ooh, yeah, there's a lot of what that part of it. Doctor Who kind of affords a director the chance to really kind of push the envelope and try things that not many other shows would get you the chance to do. There's a couple in Village of the Angels that I'm really proud of, actually, how they turned out. I'd always wanted an in-camera mirror shot. So that shot where Claire walks up to the mirror and washes her face, and the camera then pulls back and reveals that she's got wings. We did that as a physical set built with a mirror of everything. And Daff, our designer, did a great job, and even sort of made and designed toothpaste labels that were then printed in mirror on one side. And I remember the VFX guys who had a hand to play with the wings and things as well. You know, we're saying, oh, we can put a sort of a sheen, or we can put some dots and screws in. I was like, I know it's going to make it look more real, but it would sort of kill the fun of doing it in camera to put too much on it. So we sort of held back, and I just think it has really nice mood as well. I like the colors of the shot and the pace of the movement, and it was fun orchestrating the double. So from a kind of a technical point of view, I enjoyed that one. I
will say that I wrote down some shots that are personal favorites of mine. It was the first one on there, because it's absolutely, I was in awe watching it. Anyway, when it happened, I was, you know, I went, wow, that's incredible. And then finding out that you did it practically, it just absolutely blew my mind. It was one of my favorite shots of all time in Doctor Who. It's an absolute masterclass. I'm a massive fan of it.
Yeah, I really enjoyed Village of the Angels, actually. It's one of these ones we did almost all of that episode at the end of the block, so we were just focusing on that one episode then, and it was nice because you have sort of less stuff to hold in your head at one time, and Robin and I were sort of up to speed at that point. The last shot of that episode, the revolving one that sort of goes around Jodie as she turns into an angel. I really liked that as well. We worked with an amazing Steadicam, or a slightly different kind of Steadicam called an AR rig operator called Stamos, who was able to go from kind of toe to head height in one shot with him just sprinting round and round Jodie. And Jodie's the physicality of her performance in that was great. So we took us about 13 different takes, and we were kind of yelling out, "Okay, now it's on your shoulders, and now it's covering your mouth."
Yeah, funnily enough, the second one that I had on my list. So yeah, we've both got fantastic taste. We've picked out the two bangers there.
Let me jump around a bit more. Then I really like Spyfall Part 1. I was really pleased to see how well the master reveal was kind of went down, and that's largely, if not entirely, due to Sasha and his performance. And there's a shot in Spyfall where he first kind of, his eyes flick to the side, and it's like he has this glee inside of him that he just can't, he's been waiting to be unmasked, because he knows he's going to have fun with it, and you could see that just start to kind of come through the cracks. It's just a close up of him on the plane, but I really love what he does there, and so that also jumps to mind as a favorite shot or moment. There's probably loads of other ones. I can't remember. I really like the wide of in War of the Sontarans of the Doctor and Skak. I always forget which the Sontaran commander. Standing on the rock as well with all the smoke out. I like the colors in that shot. I'm sure there's more that I can't remember. What was it?
Yeah. I mean, another one that I did. I just wanted to point out, which is I actually tweeted about this like a couple of months ago. Is the pre-titles to Ascension of the Cybermen.
Oh yeah.
When it's the Cyberman head floating in space, and obviously you've got that voiceover over the top from Ashad, and it goes into the eye of the Cyberman and straight into the titles. That's it's just genius. I'm such a big fan of that.
Lovely. I mean, I can't take any credit for that at all. That's basically what Chris wrote in the script.
Oh really? So that was all from Chris. But I mean, to visualize it is fantastic anyway.
Yeah, we went down, and once I saw it, we went and grabbed a cyber head from the storeroom somewhere, and went down and shot it on my phone a few times just to kind of get the speed and pace, and to take it through the eye. So for ages in the edit, it was just me sort of rotating a cyber head towards the camera slowly. But the idea behind the shot is entirely Chris.
Yeah. Wow.
It really sets a nice tone to the episode.
Yeah. I like I said, there's so many to pick from. That's the problem. I mean, you've got Praxius. I love that shot. It's such a Doctorish shot of Jodie Runnett sprinting across the beach. Is gorgeous. She just appears from nowhere. She's just sort of in, and it just that sort of popping out of nowhere and immediately sprinting towards danger. It's just such a beautiful summation of the Doctor as a character. And Power of the Doctor, I just, again, from start to finish, that regeneration, I don't think my heart has leapt out of my mouth more than the Edge moment, because of that added bonus for me of, oh God, I get to speak to all of these. An obligatory question that I have to ask. I mean, if the opportunity ever did arise in the future, would you be willing to go back to Doctor Who? Would it be something that you'd be interested in, or do you think your time with it is done?
It's an interesting question. Because I felt, one of the reasons I wanted to do the Power of the Doctor was to kind of, sort of cap off that. It was a big chunk. When I first started doing it, I thought I was only doing 2 episodes, and I'd stayed and done, 8 at this point. So I did feel like I wanted to kind of, close the book and move on. And I've had a, wonderful time since then working on other projects and other shows, but I do miss it. I mean, it really is so unlike any other show. So I mean, I don't know if this will happen, but of course I'd be interested in doing it again if
yeah, well, that'd be fantastic, and creep you further up that list to the most Doctor Who stories directed in the revival. Maybe you can overtake some of those names, but like I said, what you've done so far is more than enough, because it's all fantastic contributions to the universe of Doctor Who. I've said this for a very long time. I don't want you to think that, but yeah, one of my favourite directors for Doctor Who, and massive fan of your work. Just so if I can gush for a moment, we're going to go have a little break now. Going to have a tiny little break. And then when we come back, we've got some features to attend to. So we'll see you all in a couple of minutes' time. Hello, and welcome back to Who Knew, a Doctor Who podcast. I hope you had a lovely break. I am still your host, Josh Carr, and I'm still here with the fantastic Jamie Magnus Stone. Jamie, it's now time to delve into those dastardly features that we have on the show. And the first one is, of course, as always, the DVD collection.
By the power of Grayskull.
The Unicorn and the Wasp, or Love and Monsters?
Which one do you think I'll prefer?
No, I mean, which one do you want to watch first?
You are pulling my leg.
The DVD collection, for anybody who is listening at home who doesn't know, the DVD collection is a collection of quintessential Doctor Who stories submitted by my guests that mean something to them, or have some close connection to them, or that they just think are really, really good. And there are many, many fantastic stories in there, and very fittingly, including one of your own, Jamie. Spyfall is of course one of your own that's in the DVD collection already. Such a the greatest honor of your career. I'm sure that was submitted by Catherine Wheeler, who I believe has asked a question in bloody Twitter, which is a questionable one to say the least, but we'll get there later. But Jamie, it is now time to find out what you would like to put in the DVD collection.
So the pick that I'd like to make for the DVD collection is Nightmare in Silver, which I touched on already, but it was the first Doctor Who episode that I ever had anything to do with professionally. I'd sort of met on directing it, didn't get the gig for very good reasons, but I felt so thrilled that I think I shot 2 or 3 or 4 maybe little second unit shots from that, and I got to witness it getting made behind the scenes, and when I was so kind of wet behind the ears and new to the industry, it just blew me away getting to sort of peer behind the curtain on that show and see how an episode was put together and all the amazing thought that went into it. Plus I think it's an underrated episode as well. I think it's great fun. I think Warwick Davis is great fun. It's not my favorite of the Cybermen designs, but they're very menacing nonetheless. And I think Matt Smith's kind of playing chess with himself alter ego I thought was really funny. So I suppose that would be my pick. That's the one for me that sort of marks the start of my proper Doctor Who journey, and then I sort of went backwards from that in terms of watching. But that was the genesis of my own relationship with Doctor Who was that episode. So I think it deserves a spot on the list.
Yeah, I mean, well, that's what the DVD collection is all about. I think having a nice personal connection to a story is always some of my favorite DVD collection picks. And what better way to honor that than the story that not only got you into the world of working with Doctor Who, but as you said before, it led to you delving into the show a little bit deeper and becoming more of a fan. So that, it's a fantastic double kill there, because it's got you in your career, and it's got its claws in you as a fan. So that's fantastic. And obviously you mentioned earlier, I mean, unfortunately it is already on the list, is Genesis of the Daleks. I mean, we can touch on it briefly, because I always give people the chance to chat about some honourable mentions, because the list is so long now, and some of the classics have already been taken, unfortunately. Genesis of the Daleks, you'd mentioned it earlier as one of your formative Doctor Who memories. What are your thoughts on that as a story? Have you revisited it fairly recently, or?
Part 1 a little bit, but it just popped into my head when you first asked the question, and I hadn't seen that it was on the list. But just because that was the first Doctor Who episode I ever saw when I must have been 6 or 7, and I didn't know what it was. But I when I was kind of small, I had kind of what I could watch on TV was controlled quite strictly for a while. And I remember seeing this, and there was just the brutal tone of it was unlike anything I'd ever seen, and it really sort of left an impression. Some of the imagery, the kind of the sort of desperate, scorched quarry, but the kind of scorched, smoky, desolate depiction of Skaro, and the sort of World War I like kind of gas masks and smoke and trenches. And something about sort of how sort of indiscriminately people were gunned down in that story really shocked me as a kid, and sort of stayed lodged in my brain. It took me many years to actually work out that was Doctor Who. I suppose it kind of always drove home to me when I was doing my episodes on the show that you never kind of know who's going to be watching or what age and what we're putting this show out, and some 6-year-old or 7-year-old might watch it and be suitably terrified, or it might sort of, an image or two might sort of worm their way into their permanent subconscious as well, which is a scary privilege, but it's kind of an awesome responsibility when you're making any show, but particularly one that kids are going to watch. So hopefully we scared some kids.
Yeah, you definitely will have done. And there's just one thing that I want to pick out of there, just because as we're recording this, The Well season 2 episode 3 has just gone out, and I've just recorded a couple of days ago our episode regarding that. So we are filming this well in advance of when it's going to be released, this podcast. So a bit wibbly wobbly, timey wimey there. But we rejoiced at the sight of a quarry in Doctor Who again, for what we believe is actually the first time since Power of the Doctor. It's been a good few years since we've seen Doctor Who good and proper, as it should be, filmed in a Welsh quarry. Have you got any wonderful experiences? Obviously you were taken to South Africa and things like that. There's something so beautiful about Doctor Who being filmed in a rainy Welsh quarry.
Any bit of quarry, it's quintessential Doctor Who, and I actually haven't seen the episode yet. Maybe in the timey-wimeyness of when this comes out, I hopefully will have, but I haven't seen it. But I'm very glad to hear that the quarries are back.
Quarries are back, yeah.
They're back. I think it's such a good fit for the show. And also, I mean, Wales with its mining history has got so many quarries. I couldn't believe how, I must have, across recce's and shooting, maybe been to like 15 of them. And there's, still, when we needed to find somewhere new, Yuan, our locations guy, would sort of produce another 3 quarries that hadn't been filmed in somehow. There's so many of them, and they each have their own idiosyncrasies and quirks. And there's just like a tangibility to being there physically that you can't see anything on the horizon. You kind of get mud on your boots, and it feels fun, I suppose, about like location filming for an alien planet. And so I'm glad to see them back, because I think that they're kind of, for me, a kind of a key and endearing part of Doctor Who's identity.
I wonder if anyone does like a Doctor Who walking tour of all the quarries. I'd get my wellies on for that. I think I would. I think I'd get my boots on. I'd get climbing down into some quarries to all looking nearly identical.
Yes,
but just be like,
slightly south to one. I'd have to come with you to point out where we were, because
Oh well, that would be lovely. Yeah, we should make a date of that one day. Speaking of quarries and delving into the dark depths of a quarry, we're going to delve into the dark depths of something much more awful than a quarry. It's bloody Twitter.
For God's sake! Bloody Twitter!
So Bloody Twitter is our segment where we hear from you lot at home, the lovely listeners, and you've come with a stack of questions for Jamie today, and some very, very interesting ones. So we're gonna rattle through some of these. So the first one is from Inspector Lemaitre, I don't know if I'm pronouncing that right, at Oakdown on Twitter, said, "This is not a question, but just wanted to say I'm a film student, and Flux is one of my biggest inspirations on something I'd love to work on in the future. And every single episode means the world to me. So thank you so much for making these stories so beautiful and special." So that's a lovely message there. It goes back to what you said about, you never know who's watching. I think that's lovely. And they did also ask a question: did you approach working on Flux differently than the standalone season 12 episodes because of its chapter structure and the continuity of it being a serialized story? Was there a deliberate change in your style or work ethic when working with one individual story versus a collection that slot together?
I think not as much as you might think. I mean, I suppose we dialed down the idea of the kind of individual movie per episode a little bit. But the thing is that we didn't have all the storylines and scripts or outlines for Flux from the start. So I was still kind of largely shooting sequentially based on when the scripts became available. So although I think Chris had maybe a bit more of a kind of a clear overarching idea. I didn't get some of that until a bit later on. So I was still, for, in large part, had to approach it with the same methodology as before. What I did like about it particularly, though, is that, I'd done 2 blocks of Doctor Who before, and sort of coming into it knowing the machinery a bit more, for lack of a better word. It's a big old beast, complicated, with hundreds of people. And I always find on any job, I sort of have this almost like first day of school nerves for about 3/4 of the shoot. And then you kind of feel like the end, you're going, okay, cool, right, I know who to go to get this decision through. I know how to, how to get the best out of this person or this set or whatever it might be. You kind of figure out how it all works, and you become more fluent in the production of the show as you go. So for me, it was nice to kind of come back for Flux and go, okay, oh, lovely, I'm fitting back into this thing that I know, this instrument I kind of know how to play a bit more fluently than I did when I started. So it kind of, I felt like I had more sort of, not free rein, but I had like looser reins in terms of being able to sort of try things stylistically or sort of indulge some of my sort of filmmaker whims a little bit more. Not whims, but I suppose I felt more confident at the controls in Flux than I did with the other 2 blocks.
Yeah, and this is a question from me, but I'm just intrigued as well, because obviously the other director for the other 3 episodes of Flux is Azur Salim. Was there much of a collaboration beforehand, maybe before shooting, to try and get that visual style consistent across all 6 of the episodes? Because obviously there's still that element of hopping about. War of the Sontarans is a very different story to like Survivors of the Flux, but because it's that one consistent story, was there any differences there beforehand of like collaboration with another director, which is probably something that you don't get to do that often?
A little bit. I mean, we don't get to do it that often normally, but it happens, I suppose, more than usual on Doctor Who. And Az and I became good friends working on that show together. And so, yeah, we would kind of keep in touch about, okay, I'm thinking about this bit of casting or this visual idea for this thing, but that's going to probably play more of a role in your episode. So we would be across it a little bit. And Az and I actually got to know each other because I was shooting War of the Sontarans when he first started, and to make that schedule work with all of the COVID hiccups and weather hiccups, he actually came down to set for a couple of days, and we split our camera teams in 2. So he took a camera off and went and did some second unit for me, which was I'm very, very grateful for, because it sort of meant that we could actually get that episode finished. So he went off and we would sort of be in 2 different corners of the quarry shooting the same thing, and I'd have a monitor to what he was doing. But that was actually a fairly common thing that happened on my previous episodes as well. Quite often I would shoot little bits of other directors' episodes, and they would sometimes shoot bits of mine, and it was very sort of open and collaborative. And sometimes the sort of timey-wimey nature of the Doctor Who schedule just requires that you need to, a bit like Annetta shooting that stuff in Power of the Doctor.
Yeah.
That was kind of normal, though, to kind of share and help each other out and shoot other bits of other episode material if needed, which is one of the kind of collaborative things I really like about this show. It's one of the things that sets it apart.
It's fascinating to hear about. It's a fascinating peek behind the curtain. Another question here from Baby Them Stefan on Twitter. Said, a lot of people have highlighted the Timeless Children's distinct colour palettes in its 3 main locations. Is use of colour very important to you in your work?
Yes, it is. Sometimes the colour palette might be sort of derived from something in the script. Sometimes it might be that you fall in love with the location that gives you a sort of a starting point for what that colour palette might be, and you build out from there. I know that on Timeless Children, Sam and I had watched Blade Runner 2042 together, I think while we were in prep, or maybe earlier on, because I knew Sam from before. But we both liked the kind of that very saturated yellow color from a couple of the scenes in Blade Runner, and thought that would work well for Gallifrey. It was kind of there already with some of the, with the kind of red sand, but we wanted to bring that in space, because we thought, well, if if the dome or any of these sort of windows had sort of fallen in and that red sand kind of came in, then that would sort of help color the room. So we wanted to kind of have this yellowy haze. So yeah, it's great. It's great fun to think about, and especially in a multi-stranded story where you're bouncing around all over the place. I think it can help really orient the viewer as well to kind of think of different palettes for different sort of story strands. So when you're intercutting, it gives you a bit of an anchor, as well as, you know, color can affect you emotionally in quite a subtle way. So it's a great tool. It's often overlooked, but it's something that I do try and think about a lot.
Yeah. And another question here, Ben at Media Enthusiast on Blue Sky said, "Hi Jamie, you've directed so many technical set pieces on Who, brackets very well I might add, but I'm curious to know more about the side of directing that involves working with actors. Is Doctor Who the kind of show where you need to give actors a lot of notes? And if you did, are there any that stand out to you?"
Ooh, tricky. I mean, yes, it's such a huge part of the show, and there's, you know, the caliber of actors that you get, and the caliber of actors even just coming in for one episode that you get is amazing. The answer is it varies depending on different actors. I mean, Jodie's instincts are so strong and so good. I found that my job sometimes was just offering kind of additional context within the episode, which sometimes would be, you know, might be quite sort of arcane, or how it would tie, you know, how what we're doing in the scene would tie into something else that we're going to do later, or to, you know, to another episode, or a bit of the Doctor's past. I would try and kind of keep that element in there, but her sort of kind of beat to beat instincts and sensing out the rhythm of a scene, she was so naturally good at that. If I tried to micromanage that too much, I would sort of take away sometimes from what she was already doing, which was often, you know, her instinctive sense of rhythm was so good and so strong. And then, I mean, I really enjoyed working with Sasha as well, who's kind of different in some ways. That we like to try and find pockets of time wherever possible before getting to the scene to talk about the context of it and talk about the background for it, and the, you know, what it would mean. But we would try and get all of that groundwork done ahead of time, so we wouldn't be trying to find the scene in the moment, even if it was just lunchtime.
Yeah.
So it depends on each one. Sometimes if it's an emotional scene, it's about sort of just making sure that you kind of carve out the time for the actor to find what they need to do, to not which sometimes, especially with the show, it can be difficult, but, you know, not rushing, knowing for the, you know, for that what the emotional core of the scene is, and knowing that maybe, okay, I know what shot I'm going to be on for this, and maybe I shouldn't do this last after this scene has already gotten kind of a bit tired because we've had to do it first. So just having a sense of who to do first and in what order, to make sure that the emotional core of the scene has enough time to breathe on set, and you have time to sort of not hurry the actors through it. I can't really think of any individual notes. It was all a long time ago now, but I suppose the answer is that every actor is entirely unique and different, and you kind of they have different sort of needs and processes, so it's just a case of trying to be sensitive to that
and tailoring your approach to fit an ensemble as well. That's the thing, is sort of being across what all of these different actors need, and you know, that one thing works for one thing works for another. It's really interesting. Speaking of actors on Doctor Who, L at Doctor_Master on Twitter said, "Who is a doctor you would love to direct?" And as we've touched on before, you've directed a fair few, which is very cool. And Elle also said, "Come back to the show, please. We miss you." So the show misses you as much as you miss it. So
thanks, Elle. Well, have a word and see. So I don't know. Patrick Troughton, funnily enough, I think you know, I would have loved to have met him at least, or had a beer with him, and there's a sort of a Chaplin-esque kind of physicality that he had that just makes me smile. And actually, just his kind of his wryness, his line delivery, his rhythm, I just find really enamoring. So yeah, I mean, that's the thing about the show is, you know, they're all knockouts. You know, anyone who's played the Doctor before is you know, of an incredible caliber of actor. But yeah, maybe Patrick Troughton. I was so glad that I got to work with Sylvester McCoy. He would have might have been my choice had I not already worked with him. But it was for such a small bit. I would have loved to have done some of his episodes back in the 80s.
yeah,
So yeah, but I'll say Patrick Troughton because I haven't met.
Yeah, no, lovely answer. Lovely answer. The sort of the archetype for the modern Doctor, really. I think, I love I think I've heard someone refer to him before as your favorite Doctor's favorite Doctor,
Yes.
which is a really cool thing to own. It's like how Sparks get called your favorite band's favorite band. Like it's a very cool indie way to be. I'm a big fan of it.
And favorite rapper's favorite rapper. That's a
yeah, exactly. And Jack Alexander, dear friend of the show, at @an_awful_Jack, said yet again an absolute banger of a guest. Absolutely loved Jamie's work on the show and thought the direction was nigh on perfect in every instance. I have to ask a question about the Rah Rah Rasputin dance scene. One of my favourite bits of the entire show. How much more was there, and just where did the brilliance of that Dalek and Cyberman glance exchange come from? Beautiful stuff. I will say this is one of many questions that we had about the Rasputin dance scene. It feels like everybody just wanted to clamour to ask about that. So
I mean, it's been lovely seeing the response to that Rasputin scene. I mean, I have to say that the credit should be entirely shared between Sasha and Chris. I mean, Chris for writing that song and Sasha just for going for it with his dancing, which it didn't actually say in the script that he dances at all. It just says that he presses the button and the music starts playing. But, when we started, we ran first rehearsal and Sasha started dancing and I was like, oh, I was wondering if you're going to do that. Great. Let's do it as much as possible. So yeah. So, and there was, I mean, we shot a lot of it. I think in the first cut of Power of the Doctor was very long. And I think it had the entire song in there. And then when we had to condense it, so we started into cutting it with Vinder and things. And as fun as it is to have basically 4 minutes of Sasha dancing, to some 70s disco, it was perhaps a little indulgent, but it held my attention anyway. So it's on a hard drive somewhere, possibly in my room. But
release the Rasputin cut. We'll start an online campaign.
Ever. But it was really good fun. And Alf, our Steadicam operator that day as well, just had a great time. He's very sort of he just loves being kind of unchained. And that amazing rotunda set was quite often you have sets that are built with 3 walls and you can't look one way because of it's the 4th wall. Whereas that rotunda set was 360 degrees all the way around. You could kind of look anywhere except straight up. So it was just such a freeing space to film in, and it was it was kind of crying out to just sort of orbit that camera around Sasha as he was dancing, and Alpha, our Steadicam op, has had a great time effectively dancing with Sasha and gave that sequence a real life. And I'm trying to remember now whether, I mean, I know that the Cyberman Dalek look wasn't scripted. I can't remember whether I did that as part of the main shoot or if we might have been back on that set a couple of days later and I grabbed it by just putting the disco lights back on. But I just thought it was kind of, it would just be funny. That was fine.
It's one of the funniest Doctor Who moments of all time. I talk about it all the time when people say, "Oh, what's the Doctor Who moment that makes you laugh?" I talk about the Sontaran chocolate scene in Flux, and I talk about that glance. It's just such perfect timing. It's beautifully done. But what a scene!
I sort of imagined that the Cybermen and the Daleks have, there's this big sort of trifecta of the the big 3 villains, but the Master's kind of leading it. This is his scheme, and I sort of imagined the pitch meeting of like the Master saying, to the Cybermen of the Daleks, trust me on this, it's going to be great, and then for them to turn up and do their part, only to then see him prancing around dressed as Rasputin, and realizing that they've maybe signed on to a daft scheme, but yeah, no, I'm glad that made people laugh.
Yeah, and our final question, as mentioned before, Catherine Wheeler, who put your story Spyfall in the DVD collection, at Wheel of Cats on Twitter, has said, "So I've heard through the grapevine, Sacha Dhawan has said that there is a version of Power of the Doctor that exists where he snogs the lone Cyberman. Is this true? Did it happen, or did it only happen in my heart?"
Oh gosh. Yeah, it's true.
It's true.
Yeah, it was. I mean, it was one of these things where it was unscripted. I think I had actually, as part of the Timeless Children, I'd got Sasha to snog the Lone Cyberman as well. And it's something I guess it's an idea I kept on trying to pitch to Chris. This fun thing,
So this is your brainchild that you just want some Master and Cyberman action on a screen.
I thought it was just kind of interesting. Back in the Timeless Children, it was this kind of union of these two sort of powerful enemies, and there's this weird sort of sexual energy about the Master as well. I just thought it'd be kind of interesting to as he gets carried away with his plans. So there was a dialogue scene in the Timeless Children, and for a take, just for fun, because sometimes I'll always shoot what's on the script, but occasionally I like to offer other things up just in case, like the Cyberman Dalek look. And I thought it'd be fun if the Master got kind of carried away and gave the Cyberman a huge kiss. And because of what Ashad's got going on with sort of his relationship with emotion, I thought that'd be kind of interesting. It gave a really interesting reaction, but it wasn't in the script, and so it didn't make it into the cut, which is fine because that's Chris's choice, and so it should be. But a few months later, and I'm doing Power of the Doctor, and up pops Ashad again, which is great. Lovely to see Patrick again, and so I thought I'd have another crack at it. So again, I don't think we did this on every take, but there was just after he smashes the bars and takes the takes his device out, I thought he should maybe give the Lone Cyberman another kiss. So we did it, but it didn't make it into the cut either. But it does exist.
It does exist. Well, again, release the cut. We need to see it. I mean, one thing I will say, third time lucky. If you do come back again, we've got to get Master, Cyberman, full on kissing in the rain. It's going to be beautiful.
Yeah, who knows?
Well, that's I love bloody Twitter. It throws up some chaotic questions. Dear friend of the show, Ben, asked Dan Starkey about Sontarans having sex through probic vents. People are weird. I am but a vessel to allow them to get it out of their heads. And I have to I have to ask questions like this, but I relish the challenge.
I'm going to need to check out that episode to find out Dan's answer, because I've opened up a whole.
Well, yeah, it's raunchy. It's raunchy, I'll tell you that. We've got the final of our features to attend to now before we wrap up the show, and it's that old favourite. We're going to take a lovely stroll down the corridor of fame.
Have you ever been limited by who you were before?
One day, I shall come back. Yes, I shall come back.
Our lives are different to anybody else's. That's the exciting
Dear Sarah Jane? Do I have the right?
Some people's small, beautiful events is what life is all about.
In the nursery compared to us, 10 million years in absolute power. That's what it takes to be really.
Every great decision creates ripples, like a huge boulder dropped in a lake.
But it was a childish dream that made you a doctor. You dreamt you could
No more. I'm not just the type. I'm the last of the type.
It just disappears, doesn't it? Everything you are gone in a moment, like breath on a mirror.
I do what I do because it's right, because it's decent, and above all, it's kind.
Love abides in the face of everything.
Now, the Corridor of Fame, for anybody who doesn't know, is essentially a hall of fame for the wonderful, the great and good of Doctor Who. And there are many, many people in here adorning the walls. There are companions, showrunners, and writers and directors as well. Some absolute legends of the Doctor Who world. And I am intrigued as to who you, Jamie, would like to enter the Corridor of Fame.
Well, similarly, I was scanning the list and I saw so many names that I think are very well deserving of being on that list. And people like Nicky Wilson and Hutcho, Mark Hutchings. But I noticed that Mark McCoy wasn't on there. I don't think. Again, there's a very long list.
No.
Okay. Well, he is now. So he was our amazing camera operator through every episode that I did. I think he did season 11 as well. He may still be on it. I'm not sure. But he's just, he's the most wonderful camera operator and gave so much to that show. There's so many shots that people kind of credit me for as a director, and they're often things that Mark has just sort of seen when I've been running a rehearsal and has offered up and said, "Hey Jamie, come over here," and as sort of done something that's so in sync with the scene and is beautiful, and it's just him and his instincts. He's such a sensitive operator, very good at kind of like very quickly reading a sense of the rhythm of the scene. He knew the actors so well that he could kind of very quickly, without needing to do something a million times, be able to sort of not even react to what the actors are doing, but just sort of be completely in sync and in step with them. Like he was sort of on their wavelength and would be able to move and anticipate their moves even on the first or second take. And he had a sort of a really good, just sort of innately narrative mind and good sort of instincts for the narrative of the scene. So some of the kind of beautiful camera work in Power of the Doctor, just in some of those scenes between Jodie and Mandip where she's starting to regenerate and her hand starts to go and the camera is just kind of gently, unobtrusively swinging between the characters and down to her hand and back up. And that isn't me saying, okay, on this line go here, on this line go there. That's just Mark knowing these human beings well enough to feel it out, and on maybe the first or second take still get enough of a sense of when to pivot, when to hold. He's just a diamond. I should also mention John Vidge, the focus puller, that worked so closely with him and sort of made it possible to kind of do these very often unscripted or unplanned moves. And John Vidge was so kind of on it that you'd be able to sort of pull focus on stuff without needing to get marks ahead of time. Yes, so I'd like to add Mark McCoy to the
that is a lovely pick. These are some of my favorite picks when we talk about the great and good, the companions, the directors, the writers, they're going to get in there eventually, but it's always lovely to take a moment and celebrate the amazing crew of Doctor Who. And it's one of my favorite things about the new era is the return of Doctor Who Unleashed, which is essentially Doctor Who Confidential, and getting to see all of these amazing people at work. And I've always been fascinated by the behind the scenes footage and going into what goes into making an episode of Doctor Who. And it's lovely to celebrate someone like Mark, who again may not always get the plaudits, but is obviously such a key part of making these stories great. It's lovely. Fantastic pick. Great pick. And that sadly brings us to the end of the show. I mean, it's been an absolute pleasure. I do have one last question before we head off. Sure. And it's a question that I ask to all of my guests. It's a cruel one, so I do apologise. But in a sentence, roughly, what does Doctor Who mean to you?
Ooh. Endless possibility.
Beautiful. 2 words. 2 words, that's all you need. Endless possibility. It's so true, and I love these answers, and sometimes the shorter the better, because that's just all you need. Once again, Jamie, thank you so much for joining me on the show. It's been such a joy chatting to you. So fascinating. I want to give you the floor to plug whatever you want to plug, send people wherever you want to send them, anything that you're working on, anything that's coming up. Please go ahead.
I don't got nothing to plug. I'm a social media recluse, and I'm about to start a new show that shoots in Belfast next month. But I don't know if I'm allowed to talk about it yet, so I have nothing to plug at all.
There's one show, I believe you worked on £10 Poms, is that correct? Yes. And that's something that's come out fairly recently that I've been meaning to check out, and I haven't yet got to, sadly, but I definitely want to give it a watch. So
I think the second series is just out. I did series 1, cast Warren Brown, who from Praxeus.
Oh yeah, of course, yes, lovely bit of crossover. But yeah, like I said, your work on Doctor Who is absolutely fantastic and speaks for itself. I echo the thoughts of many listeners. If what we've had is all of it, that's lovely, but we'd love to see you back again. And thank you all at home. You've been listening to Who Knew, a Doctor Who podcast. I've been your host, Josh Carr. You can find us wherever you get your podcasts and on YouTube. Please like, share, subscribe, follow, leave reviews wherever you can, because it really, really helps the podcast out. And you can find us on all of the socials, on Twitter and Blue Sky, Who Knew Podcast. You can find me, Josh Ryan Carr, on everything, on Instagram as well, whoknewdwpod, and you can email the podcast at whoknewdwpod@gmail.com. All of the links are below for anything that we've spoken about. I'll be back very, very soon with more wonderful guests. But in the meantime, Jamie, thank you once again for joining us. It's been a pleasure.
Likewise.
Thank you all for listening, and have a wonderful day, whatever you're doing. Goodbye. Thanks for listening to Who Knew, a Doctor Who podcast. You can find us wherever you get your pods and on YouTube. Please give us a like, share, subscribe, and a review if you can. It really helps us out. Massive thanks to Oliver Chenery for the Corridor of Fame intro, and the Sononauts for lending their cover of the Doctor Who theme to be the theme for the podcast. Who Knew is a New Kid Media production.